The sun rose over the lake, shimmering like liquid gold as waves lapped gently against the dock. I stood on my porch with a steaming mug of coffee, taking in the silence of my lakefront cabin. For me, this wasn't just a vacation home. It was my sanctuary. I had chosen this spot to escape the chaos of the city, to breathe fresh air, and to leave behind the constant grind of legal work. What nobody knew, not even my neighbors, was that today I was hosting a private meeting with none other than the State Attorney General, Marcus Langston. We had been working quietly on a case involving HOA corruption, and the cabin offered the perfect discreet location. But trouble had a way of finding me, especially in the form of one person, Karen Whitfield, the self-proclaimed queen of the local HOA. Karen had made it her mission to enforce rules on me. Despite the fact that my cabin wasn't even inside her HOA's jurisdiction, she would drive by on her golf cart peering through binoculars, sending me notices about violations like grass height or the color of my shutters. I ignored her, knowing she had no legal power. But Karen thrived on confrontation, and today, fate was about to hand her the biggest mistake of her life, inside the cabin. I straightened up papers, poured fresh water into glasses, and checked my phone. Marcus was on his way. He'd insisted we meet quietly, away from government offices, because the HOA investigation touched powerful people who might be listening. Just as I placed a confidential folder on the table, I saw movement outside. Through the window, Karen's SUV slowed at the edge of my driveway. She leaned out, glaring at my cabin, as though she could see through the walls. Her lips pursed like she had smelled something rotten. She had heard rumors of visitors to my place. And Karen despised not being in control. I watched her for a moment, shaking my head. "Not today, Karen," I muttered. But Karen wasn't one to take hints 10 minutes later. Marcus arrived, a tall, commanding man with a calm presence that spoke of authority. He shook my hand firmly and stepped inside. "Good place you got." "Here," Marcus said, scanning the log walls and the lake view. "Quiet. Exactly what we need." We sat down, opening the files. He lowered his voice. "We've connected the dots. Several HOA board members are laundering funds through shell companies. It's worse than we thought." I leaned in, but before Marcus could continue, a loud bang rattled the front door. Karen's voice shrieked from outside. "I know you're in there. This property is in violation of HOA codes. Open this door." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Who the hell is that?" I sighed. "That is Karen." Before I could stop her, the door flew open. Karen stormed inside, heels clicking against the wooden floor, face twisted with righteous fury. She pointed a finger at me. "You think you can ignore my notices, John?" she snapped. "I've seen cars coming here that aren't registered. With the HOA, that's against community rules." Marcus sat back slowly, watching. He didn't say a word yet. Karen whipped around and noticed him. "And who are you? Another rule breaker? You people think the HOA is a joke, but I am the law here." Marcus's lips curled into the faintest smirk. He stood. His presence filled the room like a thundercloud. Karen blinked as Marcus extended his hand coolly. "Marcus Langston, Attorney General of this state." "And no, ma'am, you are not the law here." Karen's jaw dropped. For the first time in her life, she was speechless. Her eyes darted between us, her face flushing red. I didn't know. I was just..." Marcus's voice sharpened. "It's just what? Trespassing? Harassing a homeowner who isn't even under your HOA's jurisdiction? Interfering with a confidential government investigation?" Karen's hands trembled, but she tried to regain her composure. "No, you don't understand. I was protecting the community." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "From what? Lawful citizens? Or from the corruption you're a part of?" The room went silent. Karen froze like a deer caught in headlights. She had no idea that Marcus wasn't just here for a casual visit. He was here to dismantle everything she thought gave her power. Karen tried to laugh nervously. "This is a mistake. You can't do this. I have rights." Marcus crossed his arms. "And so does every homeowner you've harassed. Do you know how many complaints we've received with your name attached?" Do you realize that your little HOA empire has been funneling money illegally? Karen's face twisted with panic. That's not true. I don't even handle finances. I just enforce the rules. Marcus slammed a file on the table. Oh, really? Then why does your signature appear on fraudulent invoices? Why are your emails tied to shell company accounts? Karen stumbled back, her bravado collapsing. I need a lawyer. I stepped closer, my voice steady. Karen, you're going to need one. Marcus leaned in, his tone final. Karen Whitfield, I advise you to stop talking, because after today, the state is coming after you and every crooked board member you've worked with. Karen's eyes filled with tears as reality crashed over her. She had stormed into my cabin thinking she could bully me. Instead, she had walked right into the lion's den. Karen was escorted out later by investigators who had been waiting nearby. She screamed and kicked, still insisting she was innocent, but her power was gone. Her kingdom of intimidation was crumbling as the car doors slammed shut. Marcus turned to me, his expression softer now. You handled that well. Didn't lose your cool. I exhaled deeply, finally letting the tension slip from my shoulders. I knew Karen would try something, but I never imagined she'd be stupid enough to barge in while you were here. Marcus chuckled. That's the thing about people drunk on fake power. They never realize when they're outmatched. We sat back down at the table, returning to our work. Outside, the lake shimmered, as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. Karen had thought she could control me. But instead, she had exposed herself in front of the highest law officer in the state, and in that quiet cabin by the lake, justice had begun. The next morning, the lake community was buzzing with whispers. Karen's arrest hadn't gone unnoticed. Neighbors who once feared her suddenly gathered in small groups, gossiping on porches and sidewalks. She got taken away in handcuffs. One woman murmured, "About time," another replied. Karen, however, was already back in her home. Attorney General's team had released her temporarily under investigation, but she was shaken. Inside her kitchen, she paced back and forth, ranting at her husband. They can't do this to me, Richard. I am the HOA. Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. Richard, tired and silent, only shook his head. He had long grown weary of Karen's obsession with control. Karen slammed her hand on the counter. I'll fight this. I'll sue them if I have to. But deep down, fear gnawed at her. The Attorney General had evidence, and she knew it. Meanwhile, across town, the rest of the HOA board convened an emergency meeting in a lavish clubhouse. Faces were pale, voices tense. Marcus Langston has files on us, whispered Janet, the treasurer. If Karen folds under pressure, she'll drag us all down. The president of the board, a smug man named Gregory Hale, tried to reassure them. Relax. We'll pin it all on her. She was the enforcer, the face of it all. We keep our hands clean. But one board member, a younger man named Chris, shook his head. It won't work. They have paper trails. And if the Attorney General is involved, this is bigger than just Karen. A heavy silence filled the room. For the first time, the board realized their empire of intimidation was crumbling. Back at my cabin, Marcus returned for another round of discussions. This time, he brought 2 state investigators. They carried laptops and thick binders full of evidence, John, Marcus said. You've been instrumental in getting this far. Your reports, recordings, and testimony from neighbors gave us the foundation. Now, we're taking it to the next level. I nodded, glancing out at the lake. So what happens now? Marcus leaned forward. We prepare for trial. Karen won't. Go down quietly, and the board will try to sacrifice her to save themselves. But once we're in court, everything comes out. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small smile. Justice was finally within reach. Part 10. Karen's last attempt. Karen wasn't giving up without a fight. Late one night, headlights cut across my cabin driveway. I peeked through the blinds and saw her standing there, wild-eyed, clutching a folder. I stepped onto the porch. Karen, go home. You're trespassing again. She shoved the folder toward me. You don't understand. They're setting me up. The board is trying to pin everything on me. You have to believe me. I didn't take the folder you made. This mess, Karen, You abused your power and now it's catching up with you. Tears welled in her eyes. I just wanted respect. Control. I wanted people to listen to me. I shook my head slowly. You wanted power, not respect. And now you've lost both. Behind me, headlights appeared again. Marcus and his team arriving for a late-night session. Karen froze, realizing she had just confessed in front of the wrong people. The courtroom showdown weeks later. The courthouse was packed. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing, as Karen and several HOA board members were escorted inside. Inside the courtroom, Marcus stood tall, his voice firm as he presented evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about abuse of power. It's about an HOA that operated not to serve its community, but to line its own pockets. And it's about one woman, Karen Whitfield, who used fear to control her neighbors. Karen sat at the defense table, pale and shaking. Her lawyer whispered furiously in her ear, but her eyes kept darting toward me in the gallery. The jury listened intently as witnesses. Former board members and investigators took the stand. Stories of harassment, illegal fines, and fraudulent charges poured out. Karen's empire of intimidation was being dismantled piece by piece. After days of testimony, the jury filed back in. The foreman stood holding a slip of paper. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant. Karen Whitfield guilty. On the charge of harassment, guilty. On the charge of misuse of HOA funds, guilty. Karen gasped, clutching the table. No, this can't be happening. The judge's gavel struck. Order. Mrs. Whitfield, you will be remanded into custody immediately. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Porter scribbled furiously. Cameras. Flashing again as Karen was led away in handcuffs. For the first time, she had no words, no rules to enforce. No power left. Back at my cabin, the air felt lighter. Neighbors who once avoided Karen's wrath now stopped by with smiles and gratitude. Kids played freely by the lake, their laughter no longer shadowed by HOA threats. Marcus visited one last time, standing beside me on the dock as the sun set. You did good, John, he said quietly. You stood up, not just for yourself, but for your entire community. I nodded, the lake breeze brushing against my face. Karen thought she was the law, but the real law caught up with her. We both watched the water shimmer, knowing that peace had finally returned to the lake. And for the first time in years, it truly felt like home. Karen sat in the county jail, her once perfect hair messy, her clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit. Gone were her manicured nails and designer handbags replaced with cafeteria food and steel bunks. Lunch. Another inmate smirked at her. So you're the HOA lady? Heard you find your neighbors for lawn chairs? Karen flushed red. That's not what happened. But laughter rippled through the room. For the first time, Karen was the one mocked. As powerless against rules she didn't write. In her bunk at night, she replayed every decision, every threat, every smug letter she sent. And slowly, reality sank in. She wasn't the law anymore. She was just another inmate with a number. Meanwhile, back in the neighborhood, the remaining HOA board members faced their own reckoning. Gregory Hale. The president tried to save himself by striking a deal with prosecutors. But when investigators uncovered offshore accounts filled with stolen HOA money, he too was arrested. Janet, the treasurer, broke down crying on live TV, admitting the entire board knew about Karen's bullying, but did nothing. With arrests piling up, the HOA was dissolved by court order. The neighborhood was freed from years of corruption. Homeowners celebrated with a block party, burning old HOA violation letters in a bonfire. The story spread beyond the community. Local news ran the headline, HOA tyrant brought down by lake. Resident and state attorney general. National outlets picked it up. Talk shows debated HOA abuse, with Karen's name becoming a punchline. Memes spread online, Karen's mugshot edited onto wanted posters. Neighbors once silenced by fear now gave interviews, proudly sharing how they stood up to the HOA. For the first time, the community wasn't just free, it was united. Richard. Karen's long-suffering husband sat down with a reporter for the first time. His hands shook as he held a cup of coffee. She wasn't always like this, he said quietly. When we moved here, she just wanted friends, a sense of purpose. But when she joined the HOA, the power went to her head. She stopped listening to anyone, not even me. He sighed deeply. Oh, I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't hear it. And now, well, I guess she finally has to face herself. The interview went viral, painting a fuller picture not of a monster, but of a woman. Consumed by control, months passed. Karen sat in prison, her appeal denied. She received a letter handwritten, shaky, but clear. It was from Richard. It read, "Karen, I don't know if we'll ever fix what's broken. Maybe this time away from power will help you see who you really are. Maybe one day you can start over. Without the HOA, without the control, just as you." Tears welled in Karen's eyes as she folded the letter. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't in years: regret. Back at the cabin, life blossomed again. Children fished on the dock, neighbors shared barbecues without fear of fines. The sound of laughter carried across the water. Marcus visited once more, not as the Attorney General, but as a friend. He handed me a small plaque for service to community justice. I laughed softly. "Didn't do it for awards, Marcus." Smiled. "I know. Sometimes standing up to one person changes everything." We clinked glasses of iced tea as the sun dipped over the horizon. Golden light reflecting off the peaceful lake. Months later, word spread that Karen had been transferred to a minimum security facility. She was quieter now, more reserved. No more shouting, no more rules. Just a woman trying to survive. The neighborhood never looked back. The HOA was gone, the corruption dismantled, the community thrived without rulers. As I stood on my porch one summer evening, listening to the sounds of freedom echo across the lake, I thought back to the night Karen burst into my cabin. She thought she was untouchable. But that night, she walked into her own downfall. The lake was calm again, peaceful, free, and this time it would stay that way. 5 years later, a prison gate creaked open. Karen stepped out, thinner, older, but calmer. No one was waiting for her. No cameras, no neighbors. Just the sound of a bus pulling up. She clutched a small paper bag of belongings, a faded photo of Richard, a worn Bible, and a letter she never sent an apology. Her first steps outside weren't filled with pride. They were heavy, uncertain. For the first time in years, she had no power, no followers, no HOA, only herself. The lake community had flourished in Karen's absence. The HOA never returned. Instead, neighbors formed a voluntary committee focused on helping one another. Families shared tools instead of writing fines. Elderly residents received free lawn help from teenagers who volunteered. The lake, once divided, was now a place of unity. Summer festivals, cookouts, fireworks reflected in the water. This was what it should have been all along. My cabin had become a gathering place. People joked that it wasn't just a home, it was the birthplace of freedom from the HOA. Quiet evening, while I sat on the porch sipping coffee, I heard slow footsteps on the gravel road. Karen appeared at the edge of the dock, clutching her bag. She looked nothing like the woman who once stormed into my cabin. Her voice trembled. I just wanted to see the lake again, one last time. I studied her. Part of me remembered the chaos, the lawsuits, the fear she caused. But another part saw a broken woman, stripped of everything. "Sit," I said finally. Pointing to the bench, she lowered herself down, staring at the water. Reflection wavered with the ripples. Karen's eyes filled with tears. "I ruined everything. I thought control meant respect. I thought power meant safety. But all I did was destroy. My marriage, my community, myself." For the first time in her life, Karen wasn't barking orders. She wasn't demanding obedience. She was asking for something harder: understanding. Stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. Finally, she whispered, "I don't expect forgiveness. But maybe I can start over. Somewhere, somehow." The sun dipped low, painting the lake gold. Karen stood, clutching her bag. "Goodbye," she said softly. I watched her walk away, not as an enemy, not as a tyrant, but as a woman finally. facing the weight of her choices. As the sound of her footsteps faded, the lake grew quiet again, peaceful. I took a deep breath. The kind that feels like the closing of a long chapter. The HOA was gone. The neighbors were free. Karen was no longer a shadow over the lake. And for the first time, in a very long time, everything was exactly as it should be. Years later, children still laughed on the dock. Families still gathered for summer feasts. The lake became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the most controlling forces can fall, and freedom can return. And as the water shimmered under the starlight, one truth remained, Karen thought. She owned the neighborhood, but the lake. The lake belonged to everyone. Karen boarded a bus to a nearby small town. No one there knew her history. She rented a tiny room above a diner, working part-time cleaning tables. One day a waitress asked her name. Karen hesitated. Kara, she said, dropping the "in" for the first time. She chose not to lead with authority, just to survive quietly, but old habits die hard. She'd catch herself glaring at customers for small things. Then she'd force herself to stop. She was learning humility step by step. Meanwhile, back at the lake, the voluntary neighborhood committee became a model. The Attorney General mentioned it in speeches. This community proved something important. When neighbors care more about each other than about rules, freedom and kindness thrive. Universities began writing case studies about the lake effect. Journalists visited, marveling at how a place once under an oppressive HOA became one of the friendliest towns in the state, had turned into a symbol of hope. The Attorney General returned one summer evening, unannounced. He stood on my porch, smiling as the children played nearby. "You know," he said, "this little lake has done more for community reform than all. My policy meetings combined. People see what happened here and they believe change is possible." He hinted at forming a statewide reform program, voluntary associations, no forced HOAs, legal protections against abuse. And he wanted me to help design it. I didn't ask for this role. Somehow, the chaos of one Karen had reshaped the future. Of neighborhoods everywhere. One day in her new town, Karen overheard two customers at the diner arguing about neighborhood disputes. The old Karen inside her itched to jump in, to take charge, to dictate rules. But she remembered the lake, the lawsuits, the prison walls. Instead, she brought them coffee and quietly said, "Sometimes it's better to talk than to fight." Men blinked, surprised. For once, Karen didn't escalate conflict. She helped dissolve it. It wasn't redemption overnight. But it was the first brick laid in a different kind of legacy. 10 years later, the lake was unrecognizable. Thriving businesses, children grown into adults. A bronze plaque near the dock read, "Here neighbors reclaimed freedom from control." May this lake forever remind us that community is built on trust, not tyranny. Karen never returned again. Some whispered. She moved west, working quietly, until the end of her days. Others believe she came back once at night, sitting by the water for a final goodbye. But whether she vanished into silence or rebuilt her soul elsewhere, her shadow no longer defined the community. The lake had outlived her.